Hi everyone, welcome back to Blue Echo Games. Today I'm going to take you behind the scenes as I sketch concept art for my new army and share some of the custom lore I've been working on. Let's get started. The Kechesa Nebula shot group had been sent to the Noyuna cluster to defend the province's frontier from a dark space invader. The Admiralty had said little about this rogue nation, but if the shot group was sent in full force, it meant they were a real threat. The fourth wing split from the main group with a short-range slip-space jump and entered orbit around their assigned world of Enehlu V, a small colony that had sent multiple null-space distress calls in the previous 2 weeks. The wing's Red Star Squadron, Pulsar, was preparing for a high-altitude jump into the outskirts of the colony's main hub to scout the region and secure a landing zone. "Lieutenant Kovu, is your force ready?" the commander asked, gesturing to the airlock at the far end of the hangar. "The bridge says we are in position and ready to launch at your signal," she continued, before pausing for the lieutenant's reply. Kovu briefly looked at his squad as they prepared, some checking their flight armor and mounting wing packs on their backs while others handed out ammunition in a tense quiet. "What do we know of this situation on the surface? Have the distress calls given us anything?" Kovu asked. "Sadly, interference from nearby solar activity made the message indecipherable. Your squad is going in blind. Please expect the worst when you land." Kovu nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We'll be ready." Naja's training on Kechesa hadn't fully prepared her for active duty, but the last 6 months on Enehlu certainly did. By the time the fourth wing arrived on the planet, the invaders had established a strong presence in the southern hemisphere and were heavily entrenched near the colony's capital. To make matters worse, provincial intelligence had no records of this group. Her first missions were purely reconnaissance, then reconnaissance with clearance to fire at will, which led to kill missions with clearance for reconnaissance. Her current target was an enemy leader of some kind, who had been seen commanding a trench raid on the southern outskirts of No Man's Land. That raid was costly for the Colonial Defense Forces, and her commander wanted to send a message to boost morale. Her orders were, end them, show that nowhere is safe, and she had every intention of doing so. After waiting for the planet's beautiful orange sun to set behind her, she emerged from her hiding place and slowly took position on the rocky ridge behind the enemy's camp. Her black shroud made her practically invisible against the dark rocks at night. With no moon in orbit, it was one less variable she had to manage. She peered through the high-powered scope of her A4 Kraken, scanning the enemy camp until she spotted her target, held her breath, and gently squeezed the trigger. She barely saw the gruesome aftermath before disappearing into the night. There was always a chance she could get caught, but today wasn't that day. Lieutenant Saya found comfort in the faint howl of air rushing around the fairing of her speeding bike as her helmet's noise-canceling system tried but failed to eliminate all the mechanical sounds around her. She could hear the air intake feeding the whirring engine as it powered the anti-grav units under her and the jet drive in the tail. Enveloped by the uncertainty and chaos of a border war, the steady frequencies of her ride were the only consistent thing in her life since she was drafted. She still remembered that day when selected first class by the Provincial Armada. "You must be proud to have been drafted so early," she would hear. "First class, so much promise," was her family's favorite phrase when bragging about her. She was terrified, yet no one around her would acknowledge that she was going to war, with a very real chance of never coming back. 3 years later, she was now a veteran of many campaigns on the province's edges as outside forces tried to encroach on her people's worlds. The rider in formation to her left had been there for all of them, but the rider to her right, the one carrying the assassin, was a new recruit who was trying their best to be the squad's new navigator after Saya's friend got caught out by an enemy tank last month. As much as it hurt, looking back was pointless. She could only move forward, throttle pinned as always. Yet she knew things would never be the same. What was once a mandatory tour of duty had become more personal. She no longer considered a mission successful unless someone wearing the enemy's crest suffered. Her desire to survive now conflicted with a new desire to destroy. Her squad mates said that given the status of the conflict, these risks were necessary. They knew that Mayetu wasn't going to win the war with a gentle request, and they all agreed that their daring strafing runs on enemy convoys would end up saving friendly lives in the end. They came to a stop at the assassin's drop-off point, the navigator signaling that they had arrived. The rocky foothills surrounding them were baked in a gentle glowing hue as the sun started to set. The young killer, Naja, thanked them and disappeared frighteningly quickly into the nearby landscape as the trio of riders sped into enemy territory in search of vulnerable assets and a chance for revenge. The winged steeds of the Sky Knights are terrifying creatures, bred for war over multiple centuries to support Mayetu's relentless pursuit of expansion. Any remnant of fear or hesitation was slowly replaced with a stoic obedience and killer instinct. Their riders are equally deadly, professional soldiers hailing from the planet of Nikia, where their steeds are bred. Most start their training as children, encouraged by everyone in their life, embracing the planet's elite role in their nation's military. Those who succeed in training reach adulthood with a single skill set: wing-born death. The Fourth Wing's Sky Knights, codenamed Talon, were circling in the cold winter air high above the battlefield, looking down at the fighting below as the colonial forces were trying to hold off yet another offensive. Their lieutenant, Reaper, used a set of hand signals to point out a potential target. In the chaos below, the invaders had left one of their rear artillery batteries nearly undefended. The Sky Knight's steeds were getting restless, and it was time to act. With a gentle signal, the flying beasts began a free-falling dive toward the vulnerable weapon platforms, letting out a terrifying shriek of excitement as they got ever closer to their next prey. "I'm sending you to the front lines, Viper. The colonial forces need you. You're even bigger in person. It's such a relief to have you with us. It's an honor to fight by your side. I needed a hole in that mess of barbed wire last week, but since you just arrived, I'll settle for today. Do this for Enehlu, for us." Everything that Viper had heard in the last few days echoed in his head as he made his way across no man's land in a flat-out sprint. He was the only one with strong enough armor to withstand the artillery fire blanketing the destroyed landscape that filled the edges of his vision as he ran with singular purpose. His eyes remained completely focused on the barbed wire section in front of him and the machine gun nest behind it. For this counteroffensive to have any chance, he needed to deal with the barbed wire and take out that gun, or his new planetary friends wouldn't be able to advance at all, and the deadlock would continue indefinitely. He crushed the barbed wire and threw melting charges all around him to clear the remaining obstacles as small caliber bullets bounced off his thick armor plating. He raised his revolver, aiming directly at the machine gun nest, and silenced it with a high caliber explosive round. A stray bullet got dangerously close to his breathing regulator, and he snapped his head in the direction of the incoming shot. Viper didn't hesitate and activated the charge timers and jumped into the trench, right on top of the one who shot him, whose last terrified seconds saw nothing but a warhammer crashing down on them. Captain Mist looked at her tank and the faded paint reading Hellfire on the back of the turret as she walked towards it with a crate of charge cores in her hands. The old war machine had had nearly every part replaced at some point, including crew members. She herself started as a loader, placing slug discs and charge cores in the massive railgun 3 times per minute for hours on end during the Yugesha War. She refused to acknowledge that her promotions deserved the medals they put on her uniform, knowing that she was merely taking the place of old friends who had lost to the shrapnel lottery in battle. Still, she knew she was a capable commander. Her new crew called her Mist because they said a protective mist surrounded them when she was in charge. If there was one thing that motivated her, it was a desire to keep them alive. Mist had been around long enough to know when provincial admirals were worried, even if they would never publicly acknowledge it. She knew something was unusual when she was transferred to a shock group wing detachment. If a colony needed a tank whose cost rivaled their entire education budget, this wasn't an ordinary dark space invasion. Hellfire's driver powered up the massive anti-grav units once Mist stepped on board, and the entire machine rose about 2 feet off the ground, still as deadly as the day it rolled off the Tessio assembly line. They were to provide fire support for an operation trying to relieve a colonial outpost under siege. Mist looked up at the sky of Enehlu as they departed, hoping that one day she might see this beautiful world at peace. Thank you for watching this far. Please subscribe if you want to be a part of this journey, and let me know which unit is your favorite in the comments below. You can join our free Discord with the link in the description, and go to www.blueechogames.com to download everything you need to play Shattered Moon for free. See you next week.